I like LinkedIn, and that's all I use. That's the only social media. Are you on Facebook? You guys are on Facebook?
To some
Pictures of your
degree.
kids and all that.
I mean, it's,
No.
you know, that whole misinformation, and what turned me off during COVID was I'm a huge free speech person, and I don't like people deciding what misinformation is. I think the world should decide if they're going to listen to somebody or not. And it really, what I have found is when people jump the gun and go, that's fake news, and 6 months later they find out it's real, which has happened a lot over the last year. You have to let the process work through naturally.
Are you telling me that Trump, all the fake news stuff might have been real?
I didn't say that, but things that were claimed to be false, I'm not going to get into it here because it becomes political.
We're
but
having fun.
There are
We're having fun.
There are things that were declared misinformation and absolutely false that are now true.
But do you believe that Donald J. Trump should be unblocked or unbanned on Twitter?
Yeah,
and
I do.
Come back?
I do. I think almost everybody should be. I'll give you a background. Today, in the 1980s, I was up in Sacramento, and there was a Ku Klux Klan rally in front of the state capitol, and everybody walked by it and laughed. And we just laughed at it. It looked ridiculous, guys with pointed hats and everything else. We laughed at it. They went away. They didn't get what they wanted. They wanted attention. The minute you start confronting that,
Don't
and
give them a
wanting to get
platform.
into fights and saying you're an idiot, first of all, you're not going to win them over. The way you beat somebody that's that way is you walk by
You
them.
don't fight back.
You walk
Yeah.
by them, and if they don't have an audience, they die off.
Yeah, no, that's very wise. That's the gray hair stuff. You know, like, I learned to stop fighting and watch people have a one-way fight. It's pretty powerful. You know, but it takes some resolve. Not to say you fucking
But
moron.
this is my only politics on this. I don't believe the government should decide what misinformation is because they've been wrong 100 times. So if you use the government as an editor, and they're turning out that half of what they're, I mean, is that who you want
I
deciding?
man.
Do you want the government
I heard
deciding what is real and what's not? I don't.
There was a president in Guatemala who was accused of being an old crony and a crook and having this old fucked up cabinet. So, and being thieves. So he does a thing on national TV and he's there with his like 9 cabinet members. And they're all like these fat generals from that, you know, kind of 1970s, regime. And he was like, you know, people have accused me of being a crook and my lieutenants being crooks, and he went one by one. Here's Jordi Moncada. Does he look like a crook to you? And he went through and asked the audience, does he look like a crook? At the end, he said, so you see, these are just good guys. And they were like murdering people.
They're all crooks. They were all crooks. But anyway, I think true speech rises to the top, and people will eventually figure it out. And people that produce false information, eventually it's proven false, and you let it die a natural death. If you try to kill the process, a lot of times you're killing truth, and that's what I worry about.
Yeah.
And as I saw through COVID, and during that period, there were a lot of epidemiologists that predicted everything that happened over the next 2 years, who were silenced and said, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And they were kept off Twitter, they were kept off Facebook.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you decide?
Do you think
that?
governments just worry that Twitter is more powerful than them, that Facebook is more, you know, like these have become more powerful than Google. You know, they've got way more power than
It depends
than the nation.
it depends who's in office, and what is that company doing, and what are they saying? I mean, if you look now, you know, we talked offline about what do you think is the biggest threat, and I think a lot of it is corporate activism, and how do you take up corporate activism, both externally, meaning in the Florida situation, you had Disney step into something that had to do with an educational decision made in Florida, and you know, that affects shareholders, it affects your stock, it affects how you utilize the services. And then you have internal activism where you have employees telling companies who have government contracts, we're not going to work on that. How do you deal with that? You know, if you have well, we're seeing some backlash to that now where Netflix and Dave Chappelle, you know, at one point the employees were saying, this is bad, we're going to walk out if you do this. And then when Netflix finally got to a point where not only were their revenue was starting to take a hit, but they finally said, if you don't like working here, we're not going to edit this, maybe this isn't the right place for you to work. That's the employee's right to leave and go find a job. I mean, because there's some companies that will say, great, we'll welcome you, and some companies that don't. So the employees do have a choice, but a lot of times the company, you know, we mentioned one company we're not going to mention during here that left because of internal activism in California. They made a choice, and that was what they decided. Is that going to be a movement where 50 companies move? I don't know. It's too early. But I think the whole activism thing and companies diving into political issues, that is a double-edged sword. It's a tough one.
Yeah, that's always been the case too. Like in the '60s, right? You had these guys that were like, you know, never trust anyone over 30. I love that shit.